Good evening and welcome to the Clubhouse. My name is Anthony Telfer and I'm the host of the edition number 16. It's been a public holiday today in Adelaide. Daylight saving has officially commenced and that means it's cricket season. The Clubhouse, it's where we get to celebrate the day's play, talk about what happened in the game and share in each other's successes and failures. Many cricket clubs have started this season this weekend, while many clubs in Melbourne and Adelaide, I believe, are going to be delayed because of the wet spring. But once again tonight, I'm joined by legendary Aussie broadcaster and great mate, Peter Walsh in the Clubhouse. Good evening. Walshy, how are you?
Hello, Telf. You're responsible for a little bit of angst in my life because when you told me who you'd arranged as our guest tonight, I just couldn't wait for the days to tick by so that I would have the pleasure again of having some chin wagging with a man who has been involved in the sport that he loves so much for decades, as well as the two brothers that have the name Chappell as well. I'll do the introductions officially in a sec, but one of the real pleasures that I'm getting out of our program is putting out the welcome mat and saying to people like our guest tonight, why don't you come and join us? And invariably the answer has been yes, and we can then display our talents, ask the right questions, and we can hopefully have a program that will prove to be satisfying for those who log on and check our Facebook out.
Exactly right, Walshy. Look, let's get cracking into episode 16. Once again, we've got a full clubhouse. There's lots, lots to discuss. There's a bronze medal for the lady basketballers at the World Cup, final preparations for the T20 World Cup, the makeup of the Aussie team, what's that going to look like? The AFL player draft has started. And the other thing is there's plenty of cricket coming up, the first weekend of cricket. So before we get cracking, let's handball it to you. You can toss the coin, win the toss, and open the batting tonight on the Clubhouse.
Thank you, Telf. It's a real pleasure for me to be able to introduce one of the Chappell brothers as someone who just loved cricket and loved watching Ian Chappell walk out and scratch his box and rub the helmet on his noggin when he was out in the middle, or Greg play a delightful drive off the front foot through the covers, or take one of those catches in slips. And Trevor, of course, who I don't think received as much adulation as he will get tonight, he was one of the three. And it is a pleasure to be able to say to the man who's approaching a birthday very shortly, I won't do the damage and tell people out there how old Trevor's going to be. But Trevor, I'm really thrilled to be able to welcome you aboard tonight. Greetings.
Walshy, nice to meet up with you again, and Telf, good to catch up with you again also.
Yeah, likewise, Trevor, and it's great to have you here in the Clubhouse. I'm going to throw directly straight to Walshy, and he's going to start asking all of the hard questions. And I know I've got lots of stories to talk about as well in our, partnerships we've had over the years, and I'm really looking forward to it. I've actually got goosebumps as I start talking about Trevor Chappell, Walshy.
Yeah, well, you never get goosebumps when you talk to me, so I'll get on with it. Trevor, I'm always fascinated when I'm talking to people who have a history that involves other members of the family. Now, for you, this is not about Greg or this is not about Ian, but it was about you growing up and people like Lynn Fuller and people who rendered assistance, and you then were on your way doing your own thing, not living off the coattails of elder brother Ian and elder brother Greg, but creating your own space in the world of cricket. Was it fun when you first realised that cricket could be something special in your life?
It was a lot of fun, Walshy, and it remained a lot of fun all the way through. Obviously, it gets a bit harder later on when you're a kid and you're just having fun and playing. It's terrific, but then, once I got to the stage of playing Sheffield Shield cricket and then a little bit of international cricket and World Series cricket, where it was pretty much your full-time occupation, it was obviously a little bit harder then. You're under a bit more pressure, but the main thing that I remember from it was an awful lot of fun. The places you got to go, the people you got to play against and to meet was fantastic. And I mean, that's one of the things that I think now that it's so professional is probably missing. I mean, it looks to me like it's not as much fun as it once was. I mean, I said professional, talking World Series cricket, we were fairly professional then. Shield cricket wasn't. You had to have a job because the money wasn't all that good if you're just playing Shield cricket. If you're single and no kids, that sort of thing, you could probably get by, but you certainly needed a job. And I mean, I've had many conversations with both Ian and Greg and other ex-players that, if your cricket's not going that well and you've got another job, you can get away from the cricket for a little while and have a break and think about something else. But, the players now, if they're playing international cricket, they're not working, and if it's not going that well, you can't get away from it. And then the other thing that they don't have now is the test players basically never play Shield cricket. They certainly don't play club cricket, and the Shield players play very little club cricket. So, I mean, that was one of the problems. World Series, that's all we played. There was no lower level to drop back to if you're out of form and maybe get a few runs and get a bit of confidence. That was one of the hard things with World Series, that you're always coming up against the World 11 or the West Indians.
Yeah. Well, tell me, I'm reliably informed that you could get a little feisty when there was backyard cricket and when Greg and or Ian were in your face. I'm not going to go there officially, but what I'm going to say is, how competitive was that in the backyard cricket, where, I might add, you used to get ute loads of dirt and bring it into the backyard and spread it out and make your own wicket. So there was a fair bit of thought putting into it. What was it like playing against your brothers?
That was very competitive in the backyard. with the age difference, Ian's 9 years older than me and Greg's a little over 4 years older. So most of the activity was either Ian and Greg, or it was Greg and I. As you mentioned, Walshy, we got the wicket, and you mentioned Lynn Fuller there earlier. He not only was he very instrumental in our coaching, but he was the groundsman at it's probably the second ground of the Glenelg Cricket Club. And he said the pile of dirt's over there behind the shed, just come and help yourself. So we did that. We fill up, not the ute, but Dad's boot with black soil and take it home and spread it out over just on the top of the normal backyard grass. And over a number of years, it ended up with, because it was like a practice wicket length. It wasn't the full 22 yards. It was about 10, 11 yards long. So right where was a good short length for getting the ball up around somebody's head, there was, the soil was maybe 3 or 4 inches higher. So we'd smoothed it out into a bit of a ramp, but it was perfect for getting the ball up. So if there was any arguments going on, whoever was bowling could
drop it short
and get their revenge. I remember a story with Greg playing Ian. We didn't always we had bats and we had pads. We didn't always have gloves. And Ian had hit Greg on the fingers one day, and he was down on his haunches, holding his fingers, trying not to cry. And suddenly he was aware of a presence above him, and he looked up, expecting maybe a bit of sympathy. And he said, Ian said to him, "I wouldn't worry about your fingers, mate. It's your head I'm after." And then with Greg and I, probably the story you were referring to, Walshy, I think, Greg sent me in. So I went into the back room. We had a cupboard there with all the gear in it, put the pads on, came back out, and Greg had got the watering can and watered the wicket just on a, one little spot on a good length. And after a few balls of seaming around, I said to him, "Hey, you've watered the wicket, haven't you?" And he said, No, I didn't water the wicket. Then kept batting for a while and said, "No, you've watered the wicket, haven't you?" And he admitted it in the end. So kept playing again for a little bit longer. And then I'd had enough of struggling to lay bat on ball. So I stormed off, and Telf, you'll know about the water in Adelaide. We had a water tank in the backyard. And on the water tank stand was the tomahawk that Dad had been doing some gardening with or something. So I thought, this will be the way to sort out this. So I grabbed the tomahawk and started chasing Greg around the backyard. I think we had about 3 almond trees, peach trees, nectarines, lemons, and he was ducking and diving between the trees, and he decided that I wasn't going to give up. So he made a bolt for the side gate, which was closed. So he high jumped the side gate, and I buried the hatchet into the side gate. And Greg said he came back an hour or so later when he thought I'd had time to settle down.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Now, 1 ball left in my first over, and then I'm tossing to the non-strikers end to where Telf can take over. I just needed to ask you the baseball connection in the Chappell family. We read about it from time to time about the slick way in which they were able to perform. Were all of the brothers of that inclination? Did you like baseball as much as Greg and or I suppose Ian? Did they all fit into it or what?
Yeah, well, Ian actually was picked for Australia at baseball before he was picked for Australia at cricket. He played in, I think, 3 Claxton Shield series in the early 1960s, and Dad he played in 2 Claxton Shield series in 1947 and 48 for South Australia as a catcher. Ian was a catcher. Vic, our grandfather, he played for South Australia, but I imagine he must have played in a Claxton Shield. He was a catcher. And one of Greg's sons, Jonathan, went to America to college on a baseball scholarship and played a bit of minor league baseball there, and he also became a catcher. So Greg and I weren't catchers. We were smarter than that. We got in the infield where you didn't need a mask and a breastplate and pads and that sort of thing. So shortstop was a favourite position of mine. It was like fielding in the covers to me. That was where the ball was most likely to go. And it was a great challenge to not let the batter or the batsman get it past you.
So one of our special guests, Trevor Chappell, is with us on our program coming to you from the clubhouse. And Telf, I know you love your cricket, and it's over to you.
Thank you very much, Walshy, and a great start to the show. Trevor, you mentioned a few names there, and one that obviously caught my interest was obviously Victor Richardson, and obviously we know that Victor Richardson was your grandfather, and the gates at the Adelaide Oval were named after him in his honour. What are your memories of Victor Richardson as a youngster growing up?
He seemed quite a big fella to me, a big stature. I don't know exactly what height he was, and he probably got a bit smaller later on, as most people seem to do. But I think he's probably a similar height to Greg, 6'1", somewhere around that, but quite a solid fella. And he knew everybody in Adelaide, and it didn't really matter where he went. He was one of those people that was a friend of everybody. And from what I understand, the stories from cricketers in the era that he played, he was a good fella. And I think Ian was probably similar. The teams that Vic captained, the players were very loyal to him, and the same thing happened with Ian. So I think there's a lot of similarities with the way they captained and the sort of way they led their life a bit, really. And all that doesn't only end there. Vic sort of went into commentary and did a bit of writing after he finished playing, and Ian's pretty much followed suit there as well. But Vic didn't get involved in our coaching. Walshy mentioned Lynn Fuller there earlier. He was I think probably for me, Dad was my main coach. I certainly went to Lynn Fuller's place. Dad had taken Ian to Lynn when he was about 5, started getting him coached. Lynn had a very big backyard. He had a lot of trees and fruit trees and things the same as we did. He had a tennis court, and one end of the tennis court he had built a turf wicket there. And we, Sunday mornings, pretty much any time of the year, we'd be around at Lynn's place. As I said, Ian started when he was 5. Once Greg got to 5, Ian's probably about 10. Then Greg started getting coached. And when I got to 5, same thing again. But I went there from a very young age and just messed around in the backyard in the trees. And I remember Lynn had a little shed, and it was just chock-a-block full of old pads and bats and gloves and things like that. You probably remember those, Walshy, the spike.
The green spike gloves.
Spiky gloves with no palm and that sort of thing. Those sort of the memories there. But yeah, Vic, I don't remember spending a lot of time there, a few family functions. He would be there. He would always know what we'd done. And I think from what I've heard, he would be there watching. He'd just stay quietly and he'd be watching from behind the trees somewhere. And actually, I was at a function the other day with Greg, and he said he thinks that was because if he had come out, got with the rest of the supporters there, with his reputation and fame, particularly in Adelaide, that would have distracted from what we were doing possibly, and he didn't want that to happen. But yeah, he always knew what we'd done and how we were going, and I think probably wisely thought, with Martin, our father, and Lynn Fuller, and then Chester Bennett when we were at Prince Alfred College, we had some pretty good coaching there, so it didn't need an extra input.
No, exactly right. Now, obviously, I always talk on this show about the 1 degree of separation, and my backdrop here is the North Sydney Cricket Oval. And back in the late 80s, I was, I guess, fortunate enough to spend a year at North Sydney playing under Trevor Chappell, who was the club coach at the time. And you talk about that baseball background and fielding. I remember going to the North Sydney number 2 oval, which I think, in my opinion, is the best viewing cricket oval in the world. It's got a picket fence, it's got the Moreton Bay figs in the background, and the view is of the Sydney Harbour. What a fantastic place it was to first of all, to meet you in person, 2, to experience the religious training skills that we had to undertake every night at North Sydney training. There's a good reason why you were regarded as one of the best fielders in world cricket at the time, in World Series.
Yeah, I mean, I've always, in my coaching, thought that fielding was vitally important, and in playing as well. As a player, that was something that Dad drummed into us, that you've got to be a good fielder. You're going to spend a lot more time fielding than anything else, so you've got to enjoy it and you've got to be good at it. And I mean, where we lived at North Glenelg was only like a 5-minute walk from the baseball ground. I can remember many afternoons over there. If it was winter time, it was a white ball and Dad had a baseball bat. If it was summertime, it was a red ball and Dad had a cricket bat in his hand, hitting balls along the ground or in the air, and me racing all over the park trying to catch them or stop them. And it was fantastic. And I mean, when I coached in Bangladesh and Sri Lanka and Singapore, that was one of the big areas. Well, I was there in Sri Lanka as a fielding coach, but the biggest area, or the easiest area I thought to improve, was the fielding. Batting and bowling techniques and skills can take a little bit longer to work on and improve, but fielding, with a bit of hard work, you can improve that dramatically. And if you save, as a fieldsman, if you save 20 or 30 runs, happen to run somebody out that's a good player in the opposition, or take a good catch that dismisses them, that's quite a contribution to the team's performance, even if you don't make any runs or take any wickets as a bowler. So the fielding side of it one, I loved it. And I think this all goes back to the work that Dad put in. I'm not sure. I've never asked Ian and Greg whether they did the same sort of thing, but I'm imagining they did. And it was fantastic fun, and it just, I mean, even now I can judge pretty well where the ball, even though I can't see it all that well, I can judge where it's going to go. I don't know that I can catch it anymore, but I can judge where it's going to land, just from the sound off the bat, or just because you've done it a million times, it becomes second nature.
Exactly. And one last question before I throw back to Walshy. Your time at North Sydney, and the connection there for me to go to North Sydney was my uncle Ross, and he was one of my cricket idols as a youngster, as I was growing up in Mildura. And then to go and be a part of a club like North Sydney, and then to see, the North Sydney ground, being featured on television. Your time at North Sydney, what was that like, Trevor?
It was great. Yeah, as you say, I mean, that's a beautiful oval. And I got to North Sydney just at the time they were redeveloping it. What I've heard about the old North Sydney Oval, that the footballers hated it because it was so hard. You get tackled on it and you lose a lot of skin. And the wicket wasn't that good, apparently. And initially, after the redevelopment, it struggled to settle down, but it's become a very good wicket generally now. And as you said, Telf, the number 2 ground is a fantastic. It's quite small. Well, the North Sydney Oval's quite small, and the number 2 ground's even a bit smaller. They lost quite a bit of the oval when they built the Warringah Expressway. The approach to the northern approach to the Sydney Harbour Bridge. In the they would have done that in the 1960s, I think. So they lost a bit of the size of the ground then. But it was a fantastic place to play. Great bunch of guys. I keep in touch with a few of them. Actually, I'm up on the Gold Coast at the moment. I caught up with a couple of the North Sydney guys that I played with in the 1980s the other night, which was good.
Oh, that's fantastic. Walshy, I'll throw it back to you now.
I'm thinking about all the reunions that you might be able to go to. I'm not sure, Trevor, if you could say yes to all of them, but you just mentioned it right off your tongue. You mentioned about Singapore, Bangladesh, and then fielding coach for Sri Lanka. You've travelled around Australia for the Sheffield Shield competitions, plural. There's been no shortage of you challenging yourself, but more to the point, being looked after by people who want you to help out. Now, that in itself surely gives you a buzz because of what you've done for cricket in the middle, and how countries want you to go and help them with nurturing the youngsters as they progress in their cricketing career.
Yeah, that has been a great experience. I was a bit unsure what I was going to do once the playing days were over, but I was fortunate that the coaching roles sort of picked up a lot more in that sort of early 1990s, and it's just got more and more. So yeah, I've been able to visit a lot of different countries. I played league cricket in England in the mid 1970s, three years in a row. Met a lot of great people there. Had a lot of fun playing in the Lancashire League and the Central Lancashire League in Northern England. And it is fantastic to be able to get back and catch up with those people. Speaking of reunions, the New South Wales side from 82, 83, which was the inaugural Sheffield Shield final, we beat Western Australia in Perth. So we had a 40-year reunion of that in May this year, and most of the guys were able to get there. It was quite funny when we came to a set of stairs, the side of people trying to get up and down stairs that used to run very quickly around a cricket field. It produced a bit of humour for us.
Now, what about though? Don't just sweep this under the carpet, because we mentioned Singapore and Bangladesh, and We mentioned more specifically the coaching in the field for Sri Lanka, but what sort of a challenge did that give to you? Of course, you've played in Test cricket, you've played in the one-day internationals, you're deemed as being an Australian cricketer, and here you are now helping out the fledgling countries who are just learning our trade.
Yeah, Bangladesh was, I'm very glad I did that from a number of points of view, the coaching being one, but to see, how life is in a third world country, and to, get a first-hand view of that and understand how lucky I am to have been born in Australia and played cricket in Australia as well. I mean, they were just starting off. They'd played one test, I think, when I arrived there. So, and they'd come out of 50 over cricket. They'd never had any first-class competition in Bangladesh at all, and had only just introduced it. So really all they'd done is upgraded their club cricket from club cricket to first-class cricket, and playing now playing first-class cricket. So that was certainly a challenge. The language barrier was a bit of a challenge too in Bangladesh. When I went there, they said, talking about cricket, the players will be all right. They'll understand you. But I soon found out that I was saying something meaning one thing, but what it meant to them was completely different.
What about
because
go on, you go.
Yeah, with English, not some of the guys from Dakar had a better education. They probably spoke English a bit better. Some of the guys from the outlying areas, English was very much a second language. So they'd know a handful of words. I mean, it was like me. I didn't know any Bengali, so and then I picked up a few words, but that doesn't mean you're going to understand what somebody's talking about. I remember one story that the physio told me. One of the guys he said, I've got a sore arm, because he knew arm, but he didn't know elbow, finger, wrist, shoulder. So he had to work out exactly what was injured. So I mean, it was a bit like that, and it was the same talking to them about cricket things, whether it was strategically what we're going to try and do, or that type of thing. I'd say something thinking one way, but it didn't always get through to them meaning the same thing.
No, back to Telf after one more from me, and that is the Chappell name itself, revered around the world because of the commitment that Greg made and that Ian made and that Trevor made. Did that mean things to you, or do you think that when you went to countries where you weren't too sure as to who you were going to be looking after, they knew who you are, and that would be a buzz for them to be trained and coached by one of the Chappell brothers?
Yeah, that certainly did make it a lot easier for me. And you sort of asked, did it mean anything to me? At the time when I was playing, not so much, probably. More so now. You look back at it and you think, well, how did that happen? Was it a fluke, or? I mean, I know, we mentioned Martin, our father. I know it was his dream that his sons would play not only cricket for Australia, but baseball for Australia, because up until 1968 in Adelaide, baseball was a winter game, so we could play both concurrently. But then they changed it to a summer game, so that sort of paid to Greg was about 18 or 19, I think, when that happened. Well, he would have turned 20 in 1968. So he didn't play Claxon Shield baseball, but he was a reserve for South Australia for Claxon Shield in about 1967 or 68. And obviously I was about 16, I think, when they changed. So I'd played a little bit of junior representative baseball for South Australia, but I played one season in 73-4, I think, of A-grade baseball in Adelaide. During the cricket season, because they played a lot on Wednesday nights and Sundays, and I'd had a fielding accident and damaged my shoulder in 72-3, I think, season, and I developed a really bad throwing technique in trying to protect my shoulder. So I thought I'll play baseball in the winter. That way, I won't have any time. You're running after the ball on the cricket field and you think, oh boy, this is going to hurt when I throw this back. But in baseball at shortstop, you've just got to pick it up and throw it to first and try and get the bloke out. So I thought that'll be a good idea because my arm's all right, but my technique's gone kaput. So, and that worked. And so then they talked me into playing baseball during the summer as well. So if it was a Wednesday night game or a Sunday game, I'd play cricket on the Saturday and baseball on the Sunday or the Wednesday. But if there were some Saturday games as well, so I played cricket. Ian's mentioned to me a few times, Dad had a chat to him at that stage. He was a bit worried I was going to give up cricket and take on baseball, but that was never going to be the case.
Yeah, okay. I know that Telf's got a few things on the Chappell Foundation to fire at you before I throw a few in to wrap up what's been an engrossing time this evening. Trevor Chappell joining us on our coverage from the clubhouse. Telf.
Yeah, look, I want to touch on, before I get to the Chappell Foundation, I want to talk about the 1st of February 1981, Trevor.
What happened then?
Obviously, part of World Series cricket, and obviously it was an exceptional time for cricketers at an international level to all of a sudden be financially rewarded. And I guess the pressures that potentially you were all introduced and under, but the 1st of Feb 1981, it's the last over, and the skipper has thrown you the ball, the skipper being your brother, and it's come down to the last ball where New Zealand have needed 6 off that last ball to win. What did Greg say to you?
7 to win.
7. What? Oh, that's right. Yep, 7 to win.
7 to win.
You tell the story. You were there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, can I go back to the start of the over?
Of course you can. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, you bowled exceptionally well.
I was bowling the last over. Thank you. Dennis Lilly bowled the 49th over, and he'd got a wicket. I think Paul Parker, it was, that he got out off the last ball of the 49th over, and I'd taken the catch in the covers, and I think we're only using one ball in those days. I'm not too sure. So I mean, I had the ball, and I'd been bowling at the members' end at the MCG, so continued to do that. And the wicket at the MCG then, if you ever see some footage of the 1977 centenary test, and look at the square and the wicket at the MCG then, which was the last season that Grassy Watts, he was called, he'd come from Sydney down to MCG. He retired at the end of that. So, and then if you ever see the footage of the underarm, you'll see there's not a blade of grass 4 years later on the centre square or on the wicket. And it was a very ordinary cricket wicket. It was difficult to bowl on because there's no bounce, no pace, and it was difficult for the same reasons to bat on. The ball didn't come on, it didn't bounce, so you had to be very careful batting wise. So what I'd been trying to do was bowl at a length that somebody at my pace couldn't get away with bowling unless the wicket was only bouncing about half stump high. And I was trying to bowl it as straight as I could, dig it in short so it was hard to drive, and made it wasn't going to bounce over the top of the stumps. If it was straight, it was difficult to hit across it or risky to hit across it. So that was the plan. And Richard Hadley came in at the fall of the wicket, and because the batsman had crossed, Bruce Edgar was 102 not out, so he's at the non-strikers end. He'd batted extremely well. As I said, it was not easy batting conditions. Once you're in, it became a little easier. It was because it was difficult for the bowlers to get you out. As long as you didn't do anything silly, it was hard to get you out. So anyway, they need 15 off the last over. Richard Hadley hit the first ball for 4, straight down the ground to sort of long on. The second ball, I tried to bowl at roughly the same spot. Richard tried to hit it in the same spot. He missed it, hit him in the pads. Don Weezer was the umpire from Western Australia, was the umpire. The bowler's in, he's given it out. Richard wasn't happy because he'd struggled all summer to get any Australian batsmen LBW. So he went off. Then I think Ian Smith came in next, so they needed 11 off 4 now. Is that right? Yeah.
Yep.
And then Smithy hit a couple of 2s, and then he tried to hoik one out to mid-wicket again, missed it. It hit halfway up middle stump. So they needed 7 off the last ball when Brian McKechnie came in. And we'd all sort of gathered at the fall of Ian Smith's wicket, gathered around the centre, except for Greg. Greg was fielding it mid-on. It was a terribly hot day, and we had those ridiculous body shirt things on, which were, sort of stifling. And it was extremely hot in the middle of the MCG, and the breeze, there's never a breeze blowing from one direction there. It's always sort of whirling around the ground. So the plan was when Brian sort of arrived and we all going back to our positions, same thing, straight, short. It's going to be pretty hard to hit that for 6. So I'm heading back to my bowling mark, and I noticed Greg get up from where he'd been sitting on the ground at mid-on, and he's met me at my bowling mark. And I sort of looked up and he said, how's your underarm bowling? I said, I don't know. He said, well, you're just about to find out, aren't you? And I thought, it sounds like a good idea. That's going to be even more difficult to hit for 6 than the short of a length thing that doesn't bounce. So then Greg went up to Don Weezer and said to him, I was going to bowl an underarm. And Don sort of looked back in shock. So he went over to Peter Cronin, the umpire at square leg, and just checked to make sure that it was in the laws that we could do that. And they agreed that it was. So he came back, Don came back to the bowler's end and said to Brian McKechnie that I was going to bowl this one underarm. Brian was as shocked as Don Weezer had been and not happy. And over the years, I've got to know Brian quite well because we've done quite a few functions together, and actually be doing another one in a few weeks for the Gordon Cricket Club, who I played at Gordon before I went to North Sydney. They're having a function in a couple of weeks. Anyway, so then Rod Marsh was saying, no, mate, don't do it. And I just sort of shrugged my shoulders and said,
Marshy was quite animated, wasn't he, Trevor?
Yeah, he was against it, obviously. And he told me not to do it. And I said, don't tell me, tell Captain. He didn't do that. So I bowled it underarm. Dougie Walters has always said it was a no ball because I bent my elbow and then straightened it again. And fortunately, it went straight. It wasn't a wide. And Brian has said a few times in these different functions that he didn't want to get to it, so he just defended us, and off we went. And Jeff Howarth, the Kiwi captain, came running out onto the ground, and because he was playing in England a lot, and they had taken underarm bowling out of their one-day regulations for domestic one-day cricket, or it may have been even international cricket, and I'm not sure. So he was remonstrating with the umpire saying it's not legal, they can't do it. But they said, well, it is, it's in the Australian regulations. It wasn't in the Australian regulations the next day, but it was on the Sunday. It was taken out by the time we played again on the Tuesday in Sydney, and it was out of the regulations by then.
Wow, it's amazing.
The administrators have done everything possible to stop. The bowlers come up with all these tactics to stop the batsmen scoring too easily, and the administrators always wipe them out.
Exactly right. One last question from me. You're very actively involved in the Chappell Foundation and raising funds, and you've got a function coming up. Tell us a little bit about your involvement in that and what it's all about.
Yeah, Greg set up the Chappell Foundation with a good mate of his, Darshak Mehta, who's the chairman of the Chappell Foundation. Darshak approached Greg, we approached all of us initially about the Chappell Foundation or setting up something. And Greg said, it had to be in Australia and it had to be to do with youth. So it came down to the homeless youth, because there's a ridiculous number of homeless or young people in Australia that not necessarily sleeping on the street, but they'll be couch surfing at a mate's place, or sleeping in a car, or, it's something like 40,000 on any given night in Australia. And it's only got worse in the last couple of years, with a whole lot of jobs for young people have disappeared in the food and beverage sort of industry. So, I think it's been going about 4 years, the Chappell Foundation. As a sort of started to say, Greg's the main one on a day-to-day basis involved with the Chappell Foundation. Ian and I support it through the various functions. They have a dinner. They had a dinner in August, I think it was, with Pat Cummins was the guest speaker. And they've had, Shane Warne was there a few years ago, Ricky Ponting, Jimmy Barnes, who himself had a pretty torrid time as a youth. So yeah, as you said, we got the sleep out is coming up on the 16th of October at the SCG. This will be the third one live at the SCG. Last year, with the restrictions on gatherings and that sort of thing, it was a virtual event. So I think it was Mitchell Johnson might have slept in his dog's kennel at his place up in Brisbane. Yeah, I don't know where the dog slept, but so people slept on their lounge or on their veranda or things like that. But we're back on the SCG on a bit of cardboard under a piece of plastic on the 16th of October. So if anybody out there would like to support it, there's a whole host of different sporting people. In cricket terms, Simon Taufel, umpire Peter Neville is there. Kim Hughes will be there. Jonathan Moss, who played quite a lot for Victoria in Shield cricket, will be there, and myself as cricketers. And if you want to see who's sleeping out, go to the sportstarsSleepout.com.au and you can pick a sports personality or sports person. It's a mixture of males and females. A few of the Sydney United footballers will be sleeping out.
So you can pull up a piece of cardboard, Trevor, and sleep next to one of your idols, I guess.
You can, although the security at the SCG is pretty tight. Unless you're officially in the sleep out, they probably won't let you in. That's one of the things with it. We brag that we're sleeping out in the open, but it's in a very secure venue. And if it does get too cold or too wet, we can duck into the change rooms and get out of the weather. Whereas the people are actually sleeping rough
Don't get that choice.
No, they don't get that choice, and that must be one of the terrifying things of being out in the open, is the weather or your safety.
Exactly. Look, we'll share a link for where people can make a donation, and obviously we want to get on board and support the Chappell Foundation. So we'll put that up afterwards and make sure that our viewers get on board and support you with that, Trevor. One last one from you, Walshy, before we let Trevor go. And it has been an absolute pleasure catching up with you once again, and I'm looking forward to catching up with you when you come back into Adelaide in the next few months.
Great.
So we'll be talking about the New Zealand connection with that Under Armour. Prime Minister Robert Muldoon said it's the most disgusting incident I can ever recall in my career as being a Prime Minister in Kiwi country. That was pretty rough, wasn't it?
Wow, coming from a politician, I think it is. Yes, yeah. I mean, it wasn't a good thing to be done. Obviously, not in the spirit of the game of cricket. Although, I mean, if you read the book, I forget who actually wrote it now, Never a Gentleman's Game, you'll see that match fixing and or gambling on cricket and throwing and all sorts of things, probably underarm as well, has been around from day one.
Fair call.
Yeah.
Cool. Now, who finished up with the ball?
Well, Dick French,
The umpire.
he had umpired the game on the Saturday, so they had three guys on rotation. They didn't have match referees or third umpires or anything like that at that stage. But Dick was the sort of reserve umpire, I guess, if one of the other guys had got injured. And he says he's got it. I remember doing something with Dick, or probably 15 years ago, with the ball. I mean, it looked like it could have been the ball. He reckons he went into the change, or the other guys came into the change room after the game, and he just took the ball from Don Weezer, who had it, and hung on to it. So Don copped all the rough end and didn't get the ball.
Now, the last one from me, you would have spoken at so many nights, sports dinners, where you were one of the guest speakers. Did you ever have an experience where somebody didn't ask you about that ball in that match against New Zealand? I'm being serious.
Yeah, probably not, I don't think. There was one funny incident in Greg and I went over to New Zealand and we played in a cricket tournament, and then we had a golf day, and there was a young Kiwi lad, about 16, was my caddy, and he was the son of somebody else that was playing. And we're walking down the fairway sometime, and he said to me, "Did you ever play against New Zealand?" I said, "Oh, don't you know about the underarm?"
So these stories, I tell you what, you've got plenty of them, and the real amazing thing for me, your memory, you're so retentive, you know exactly what's going on, and you're talking with so much relish about what it was like in the backyard with the two brothers, and your way of working your way through and playing cricket for Australia and giving us so much. And that's what you've given on our program, Trevor. An absolute delight to speak to someone from Yamba. I've never spoken to anyone from Yamba before, so you've made my night already.
Great. Thanks very much, Walshy. Great to see you.
Yeah, likewise. And thanks very much for joining us tonight here on the Clubhouse, Trevor. No doubt we'll catch up with you again soon. And by the way, the Veterans Cricket, the Nationals are coming to Adelaide in November, and we've got Big Brother Greg lined up as one of our guest speakers at the Sportsman's Night. So we're looking forward to catching up with him. So the only one that we'll be trying to line up now will be Ian. So hopefully we can catch up with him too soon. So thanks very much, Trevor.
Okay, thanks, Telf.
Cheers. Speak soon.
See you, Walshy.
See you later, Trevor. Wonderful to have a chat. All the best.
Bye.
There you go, Walshy. Another legend in the clubhouse.
He's got so many stories to tell. And, you know, when we think about when we messed around as youngsters playing cricket, how often did we say to each other, we played in the backyard? And for me, Mum got her stocking out and the ball went in the stocking and it was hung on the clothesline, and you played against, with the bat up against a ball that was in the stocking if you were quick enough to hit it. And that was how you got involved and played the game for a period of time. I didn't play it at any level, but it was so much fun, and Trevor articulated so beautifully.
Oh, he did. And can you imagine the backyard games with the Chappells in Glenelg, in North Glenelg back in the day? It would have been truly amazing. And obviously they had their own pitch there, and they obviously acquired that from the Glenelg Cricket Club. That soil would be worth a fortune these days. Let's just keep racing on here. We've got about 10 minutes before we're going to wrap up. Let's have a look at the T20 World Cup quickly, Walshy. I've noticed in the last few weeks, past scores for T20 games are now going over 200. We've seen India, South Africa, England all scoring over 200, 10 and over. It's the new norm in T20 cricket.
Well, it is. And, you know, I'm turning the clock back here. When it was 50 over cricket, if you got off 30 overs, if you got to 100, you'd be thinking, hey, we're going pretty well.
Yeah.
We've got 100 off 30, so 20 overs to go. If we get 4.5, we might get up to 200. What you're saying is spot on. It is the ability of improvising for the top order batsman, and also the ability during the middle order and down to people like Adam Zampa we talked about, who's not in the squad, but someone who can hit the ball in a hurry, and 30 or 40 runs could be scored in the last 3 or 4 overs. It's good for the game, but it makes it pretty tough for the bowlers, doesn't it?
Oh, it does. It's definitely a batsman's game, that's for sure. And we see the Aussies are taking on the West Indies this week in Queensland, so we'll be following that with very anticipated anxiousness to see how the Aussies go and which players perform, because I think there's still an opportunity that they can maybe make some changes to their T20 World Cup program and their team. So let's wait and see who performs this week for the Aussies. It's only 47 days now to the over 50s nationals, as I just touched on with Trevor. And yes, we do have secured Greg Chappell as our guest speaker at the Sportsman's Night on Monday, the 21st. One of the things we're going to do over the next 6 weeks or so, Walsh, is we're going to feature one of the state captains from each of the state teams. So I think what we might do is maybe start either with South Australia, or we might even go into Queensland and see if they can let us know who their captain is of their Division 1 team, and maybe work our way down the East Coast and catch up with the skippers and see what they're up to in preparation for the Nationals. So I'm really looking forward to that. Do you want to touch on AFL, Walshy?
Well, there's been a bit of news in the AFL. Of course, we should mention that still to be sorted is the tribunal that will sit, and there'll be a hearing of what's happening in the life of, if there's anything happening in the life of Alistair Clarkson. And similarly with Chris Fagan, nothing's been determined. Jeff Kennett has had his say at the Hawthorn Best and Fairest, which was on the weekend. We had Sam Mitchell, who's the current coach, saying a few things, and Luke Hodge, who was the previous captain a few years ago, he said a few things. The few things that I'll say are, let's wait until such time as everybody has had the chance to say his or hers. Exactly. And when that's done, we'll move on. At the moment, it must be a torrid time for all and sundry if they want to say something but they can't, or they may have said something but they don't want to say that again. We'll have to wait and see and watch this space. Now, the space that's happened in terms of football, I'll just flick my pages over here. It looks as if Brodie Grundy is definitely going to Melbourne. That's almost been certed. Here's the big one. Jason Horne-Francis, who was the #1 draft pick in this season, he's been having a look at Port Adelaide and having a look big time. And that might be a chance. Now, in effect, what might happen is the Kangaroos might say, all right, we've lost our #1 draft choice. We're not going to give away the next #1 draft choice. Let's go and look hard. And that's not going to be easy. So they want to hang on to their trade #1 pick. Luke Jackson, we think, at the Dockers. Tim Taranto from GWS has gone to Richmond. Jacob Hopper is attempting to go the same way to Richmond. Rory Lowe, a stop sign for him to move from the Dockers. They won't release him. Harry Mackay, a 7-year contract to stay with Carlton. Extraordinary. Blake Acres has gone to Carlton, and Bobby Hill from the Dockers looks like he'll finish up at Collingwood. They are the bits and pieces, and this is not sort of blowing our own trumpets, but Brad Scott got the job at Essendon. Now he has stepped in, and let's see whether or not the Bombers can get themselves organised and become a force again, because if they can, it means another side from Victoria might be making haste this time next year.
Yeah, exactly right. And look, do you think Scott will reach out to James Hird and get him involved back in the club in any way?
I don't think so, and that's not because there's something between the two of them by way of they don't get on. But I think Brad Scott's got to do it nice and clean. From James Hird's point of view, I didn't think that Kevin Sheedy. Well, what he did was he put his hand up and said, "I'm voting for James Hird." That's not helping Brad Scott. They want to start from scratch, and I think they will. And when they played reasonably well throughout the year, they looked all right. But they're going to have to get some recruits. And Brad Scott, who did reasonably well with North Melbourne when he was there, I think he's the man. Let's get behind him and see what they can do.
Yeah, exactly. And look, we really haven't touched on any NRL at all in this program since we started, Walsh, and it's probably remiss of us that we haven't, because obviously we've got viewers and listeners in the northern parts of the country. But the NRL Grand Final on the weekend or yesterday, Penrith destroyed the Parramatta Eels, and obviously they've now gone back to back. Ivan Cleary, what a coach to do that, and then obviously to have his son Nathan as the player as well, playing with him. I don't think I've ever heard or seen of that before. But Dylan Edwards produced the game of his life, and at 22-0 up, the tackle that he put on the Parramatta player to stop a try really epitomised the tenacity of the Panthers. And Dylan obviously was the winner of the Clive Churchill medal as well.
Well, it was strange because we watched that game the previous week where Geelong got out of the blocks and got 36 points in front and won by 81, and you walked away and you thought, all right, we don't have as much salivating when we talk about the National Rugby League. I hope the game next week is going to be closer. Well, it wasn't, because Penrith scored the first 5 tries.
Yeah.
And that was all. That was it. 28-12. The fan base belonged to the Parramatta Eels. They had people everywhere. But to nominate individually is unfair. They just had a dominating team, as you said, Telf, back to back. That's hard to do in any competition, particularly at that level. And they won handsomely. And congratulations. 28-12. They thrashed the opposition, and the Eels can skulk away and have their Mad Monday, which they have probably had. What's today? Monday, is it? They might be having it now.
They will be well and truly into it. I wonder if they get dressed up as well as the Geelong Football Club did.
Can I just say something on that? And this is probably a little bit untidy, but I didn't like that.
Oh, you didn't?
No, I didn't. No, I'll tell you why.
I thought it was great humour, Walshy. Come on.
Yeah, I didn't laugh because I've got people that are in residential care.
Of course.
And they didn't know what was going on. They didn't have a clue about. They were up to speed to say, who are these people that are getting dressed up? They had enough to say, I can understand what's going on, I think. I reckon they could have done it a little better. That's only an opinion.
You are entitled to your opinion, but I thought it was brilliantly done. They were regarded as the oldest team ever in the AFL, and they won the flag quite convincingly. So too old, too slow, they. Yeah,
but they pinched that from Hawthorn, Telf. We said that in 1991.
They did indeed.
We said too old, too slow, and then we won.
So, and who's going to beat the Cats next year, Walshy?
Oh, look, we would have asked the same question of Melbourne last year. When Melbourne won their first 10 games in this year.
And then fell in a hole.
Very hard to win 2 in a row.
It is.
Anyway. Hey, but can I just throw into on the basketball? We've followed that through. The USA, they found a way to win in the finish. They beat China 83-61, only by 22 points.
Yeah.
But in other games, they'd scored 150, 140, etc. So they won their 4th straight title and their 11th in a row. That is monumental. And for the bronze Opals, they thrashed Canada, who they'd struggled with early in the piece. They won 95-65 by 30. Lauren Jackson officially said, I've had enough.
But what a game she played, Walshy.
Hmm?
Hey, what a game she played in that third quarter.
Absolutely. 41
She
years
turned it
of
on.
age. She was good. But
Yeah,
she's
she was.
decided now, and I wrote down all of the teams that she's played with since she was at the AIS when she was 16, and I got to 12
Wow.
teams around the world. And I thought, no, that's enough. 4 Olympics, 4 World Cups, an absolute star. Both her parents, Gary and Marie, both played basketball for Australia. Big drum roll. Our next program next Friday.
Looking forward to this one.
This is a big one. The Ballarat connection.
Oh, here we go.
Walshy Maher, who's married to Tom Maher, both are in the Hall of Fame, and that is the Hall of Fame from basketball, recognised around the world. The induction went for Robyn after these World Championships and Tom last year, so we'll have a double whammy for all of our viewers next Friday. That's Robyn Maher and Tom Maher, and I'm looking forward to that already.
I know. And the funny thing, when you were telling me that today, and I'll just share this with the watchers, listeners, viewers, etc., that you rang up to speak with Robyn to see if she would like to join us on the show after being inducted into the International Hall of Fame. And Tom said, "What about me?"
I think you should start that song, what about me? And
so it's going to be an absolute cracker.
To see them play, or Tom, not so much. Tom was a brilliant coach.
Yes.
And just a little aside, Tom coached 4 of the Chinese players who played in the game for gold against the United States. He and Robyn coached in China for a period of time. They've been the I've been everywhere people, and we're going to dig deep and find out all about the lives and times of the Maher connection on Friday night.
Exactly. Hey, Walshy, it's 7 o'clock here in South Australia. We've been going
Tuesday morning
for an hour. We've been doing an hour. It was great to catch up with Trevor Chappell tonight. That was really, really great to reconnect with him, and what a ripper bloke. Let's do it all again Friday night, Walshy.
Look forward to it, Telf, and to those who are jumping on board and having a look at what we're trying to offer up. I throw out a suggestion to you, because we've got some really good, strong, positive feedback. If you've got someone that you think you'd like to hear from, we can't guarantee it, but we'll do our best, because chasing is one thing, and getting access to someone like Trevor, who might have been a little bit reluctant initially, well, he might have started off the short run, but then he got into the long run, and he was magnificent.
Yeah, no, he was indeed. And Tony Trees just reached out and sent me a message. I should have mentioned it while Trevor was on, but he opened the batting. Tony's playing for the York Peninsula or YP over 50s team. I think he's over the age of 60, but he said he opened the batting with Trevor in Thailand playing cricket. Yeah, there you go. It's a small.
They're out there. They're at Telf. They are out there everywhere. And if you're out there, don't be a stranger. Touch base. You know how to contact us, and we'd love to follow through, because we've got a truckload that have been slapped their names on our whiteboard, and we've got some really good ones coming up.
Exactly right. Thanks very much for joining us all tonight, and to Walshy, good night, mate, and have a great week.
Will do, Telf. Always good to chat, and good night to everyone, and we'll talk again on Friday.
Good night, all.